All right, so we can get started now. On behalf of the Food and Land Use Coalition, Climate Champions, and the UN Foundation, a very warm welcome to this webinar on food systems action for COP30. My name is Les Brun, and I'm the Director of Climate and Food at the UN Foundation. We have a great set of leaders and experts today, and I'm delighted to be in such great company. Huge thanks to all the speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their insights and guidance here today. And a huge thanks to all of you who have joined us today as well. This webinar will last 90 minutes, like 1.5 hours, and we do not expect having any time for Q&A, but if time allows, we will be open to taking a few questions. And as you can see, we've chosen to use the normal Zoom setup as opposed to the webinar mode, because this webinar is a service to the food and agriculture community, and we want to help enable dialogue and collaboration and also see all of you. So please turn on your video if you feel comfortable doing that. And also introduce yourselves in the chat box, share thoughts and ideas, and connect with fellow attendees. We'd be delighted if you make some new friends today. This call is being recorded, and we will be following up with you after the call. Alicia will share some more details on that as we start. So let's just do a quick run through the calendar here. The agenda. So we're going to be starting with me just setting the scene, which is happening this very moment. Then we'll have a section on context and framing. We'll first hear from Maria Neto, who's talking about Brazil's leadership on food systems and the journey to COP30. Alicia Motara will speak about the opportunities for food systems collaboration at COP30 and food systems, most generally speaking. And then we will have Francesca Kamyla from GSCC talking about COM's key narratives and in the lead up to COP30. We'll then go to a different section where we will have a lot of rapid interventions on key issues, work streams, and priorities as we see it this year. We'll hear about the NDCs and NBSAPs from Martina Fleckenstein. We'll hear about financing from Claire Besson. And we'll hear about regenerative agriculture and restoration from Kamyla Borges. Praveen Rajidistan will talk us through adaptation, and Sarah Lahaye will talk about nutrition and hunger. And finally, we'll hear about farmer engagement and family farmers from Andrea Porro. After that section, we will have, if there's any time for Q&A, we will do that there. If not, we will go straight to the closing remarks, which is going to be from Gonzalo Muñoz from the High Level Climate Champions. So for the first section here, we will have Maria, Alicia, and Francesca. And I'm very delighted to start by inviting Maria Neto to talk to us today. Maria Neto is the Executive Director of the Instituto, Clima y Sociedad, the Institute for Climate and Society in Brazil. And she's coming to us from London today, where she is over there to ensure that she is set up for the rest of the year. So Maria, over to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lars, and thank you everybody for giving us the opportunity to talk here. I'm sure Kamyla from our team is going to give much more actually bright and insightful ideas of what we are doing with regards to the COP30. But I was asked to give a bit of a context, and I think what we are seeing in this COP, and I think this is very important, COP30 is about the next 10 years, what we're going to do in the next 10 years of implementation of the COP. In COP28, we came out of Dubai with a number of targets and a number of ambitions where food systems was recognized as a key topic, both in terms of improvement of resilience and adaptation, as well as the importance of the sector for reducing emissions and removing emissions. Last year in Baku, we had an agreement about what take the roadmap to scale investments, in particular for emerging markets, where we recognize we'll need about 1.3 trillion by 2035. Now, with these ambitions set in Dubai and Baku, now we have to discuss in Belém what is going to be the implementation pathway for all this to happen in the next 10 years. And I think here, in the opportunity of Brazil, given the relevance of the agriculture sector in Brazil, a lot of the innovation that Brazil is bringing to the table. Brazil has been doing a lot of work on biofertilizers, promoting sustainable practices, innovation and technology when it comes to regenerative agriculture. We do see Brazil as a huge opportunity for restoration, as Kamyla is going to go much more in detail, in terms of millions of hectares that can remove greenhouse gases and offer opportunity, for example, for further sustainable food systems. We do have also a number of initiatives in Brazil that are innovative with regards to financing, and talking about also Baku Belém not being just about scaling the opportunity of promoting sustainable agriculture practices, but also scaling finance. I think some of our experiences in Brazil, for example, with our Agriculture Plus program to support actually good practices in removing greenhouse gases through agriculture, as well as some of our programs to support restoration and forest conservation and conversion. I think we can bring also a lot of initiatives that we hope will be action and implementation that we can put on the ground. But I also wanted to highlight some important follow-ups that relate not only with the climate agenda, but what the climate agenda can bring in terms of nexus with nature and with the fight to hunger and poverty. Last year, with the G20, Brazil was leading the work on the G20, and I think we managed to have one of the most important outcomes of the G20 being the Global Alliance Against Food and Poverty. And obviously, we hope that the outcomes of COP30, also in terms of the implementation of the Climate Convention, is actually focusing very much on what that means in terms of the alliance itself and how the alliance can also bring good practices in terms of resilience and adaptation, but also in improving equality and distribution. We think also that the COP offers a great opportunity for us to demonstrate, as I was mentioning, the relevance of aligning biodiversity with agriculture. We are going to have the COP taking place in the Amazon. And although the COP is not only about the Amazon, we really expect that this COP can demonstrate how we can align and have better combination of agriculture production, bioeconomy, as an opportunity for promoting standing forests and as an opportunity to actually promote not only increased opportunity for food production, but also conservation. And we think there is a lot of relevance to that. I think we will have some talks here about the tropical forest forever, as I'm seeing, as well as, again, Kamyla talking about restoration. So I think this is going to be a good opportunity. Finally, I think one important topic that is also going to be at the COP is that the cost of inaction and the cost of impacts of climate change, unfortunately, are increasing enormously. And we have seen last year in Brazil, the systems of impact of climate change last year that actually led to a very dry season in the Amazon have actually had an impact in the overall Brazilian territory, leading to fires and dry seasons that we have not seen in years. And the accumulated actually impact of climate change over the last 5 years in Brazil have actually had an enormous impact on our agricultural production, leading to a very important conversation that we hope also will start having taking place in the COP30, which is that we need to start pricing the risk of climate, because a lot of these costs are costs that are economic because they were not calculated. So the cost of inaction, in other words, is much higher than the cost of action. A lot of the losses we had last year on agriculture in Brazil were not insured. So how can we start having a more serious conversation on developing de-risking mechanisms to price these risks and promote good adaptive measures, which include, in many cases, all the activities we're talking in terms of regenerative agriculture and combining agriculture with forests is actually a good way, not only to promote productivity, but also to reduce these high economic costs. We are seeing both in private as public sector, as often our public sector also has to cover to these losses. So we hope there will be some discussion also in the COP on financing adaptation, on seeing how we can price these risks and scale up private investments with clever mechanisms and clever combination of public, private, concessional and commercial, international and national resources. And so part of these conversations we're having today on mobilization of finance country platforms should not be oriented only to the energy sector, but for sure should be including also nature-based solutions and the agricultural sector. So I will stop here, Lasse, because I wanted just to get these opening remarks, but just to say, I think we have a roadmap now from Baku to Belém in terms of the finance sector. We have some targets that were set in Dubai that are orienting us on what we need to do in the next 10 years. We hope all the countries are coming with ambitious NDC. In the case of Brazil, clearly agriculture is a big part of it, but we also see mainly this COP as a big opportunity for us to lay what is going to be this implementation pathway, concrete action that we can all work together, both to scale up finance, have better and more intelligent solutions, promote innovation, and take advantage that Brazil is a big agricultural country to demonstrate by giving the example that we can actually be part of the solution. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria, for this comprehensive overview. Very helpful indeed. And you ended on the important point of implementation. People are saying implement, implement, implement is kind of the slogan for COP30. And just on that very briefly, before I hand it over to the next speaker, in terms of implementation and stakeholder engagement, are there any specific stakeholders that you still think are not into the game as much as they should be, and how can this community help bring them in?
Sure. I think there is a lot of different conversations we need to think in terms of stakeholders. Certainly, we need to have a better conversation. For example, I was talking about the risk management. In Brazil, we created now a kind of an observatory to talk about risk and climate change impacts in agriculture. The insurance market, for example, and agriculture have not yet been talking enough. Although this is not new, no, because the climate change impacts is something, but vulnerability to climate is something that any agricultural business is used to have when we talk about financing. I also think that development financial institutions are very important when we talk about access to finance. And if we want to promote innovation, and if we want to promote a scale, you know, when we talk about regenerative or restoration of degraded lands, very often the capex or the investments are high, and they are productive and they can have a lot of benefits, but there are, of course, risks and costs associated to that. So we need to have a more serious discussion on the scale in terms of both access to finance for smaller farmers, but also scale solutions. When we talk about restoration, we need to discuss how we do this de-risking as well. A tree may take 4 or 5 years to grow. How we deal with farmers that are used to take loans and, you know, do investments for much shorter terms. So this is, for example, this kind of players we need to bring to the table when we talk about implementation. I also think it's important for us to be able to have this conversation looking at different regional and different types of situations. It's obvious if we look at in terms of Brazil, that we have different biomes and different problems. So how can we learn from each other? Also, finally, I think on the innovation, I was talking, for example, about the biofertilizers. I think a lot of the technologies and innovations that we can share among ourselves, agriculture can be a huge sector for what we call high pollutants, right? Methane, and also reducing costs, for example, of fertilizers, moving from, you know, industrial fertilizers that rely a lot on N2O to actually other practices. These are maybe areas that we could demonstrate some breakthroughs, and maybe the sector should be paying more attention to as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria. Really appreciate it, and appreciate your taking the time for just spending a bit more time talking about the implementation and particularly the innovation side. And it's going to be very interesting to see how things unfold over the coming months leading up to COP30, and as you allude to here, in the time afterwards as well, because there will be a lot happening at COP30, but there will be time afterwards where a lot of the work that we carry out this year will need to go into implementation and financing mode. So with that, let me just bring up the slide here again to show you what's coming next. We'll now have Alicia Motara, who's the Director of Policy and International Engagement at the Food and Land Use Coalition, talk us through some of the key opportunities at COP30. And Alicia, I will bring up your slides straight away, if that's okay here.
Thank you so much, Lasse, and thank you everyone for joining. We're delighted to have so many people with us today.
Hallo.
So thank you also for the really helpful discussion of what could be the opportunities at COP. I know we've all been speculating about what is the presidency going to do, what does the action agenda look like? And as FOLU, we wanted to really offer a sort of draft kind of organizing framework for how we as a community might really think about the food systems agenda at COP, spanning across sort of the negotiated, more official streams, but also what Brazil brings to the table as a presidency and sort of the action agenda more broadly. Allow me to just give a couple of caveats before I go into the details. Obviously, this is an ideal scenario. We know that we live in a challenging political climate, and Fran, who's going to speak after me, will touch on that. So this is really an ideal state of mind, let's say. Second caveat is that this doesn't specify the exact deliverables that we as a community should be pushing for. And our hope is really that this is the beginning of a conversation with all of you to co-create some key action agendas and some key items that we want to be pushing for under each of these buckets. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to ask my colleague Kamyla to share a link in the chat, which will ask you to fill out a little bit more about what your organization is doing at COP30 across the pillars that I'll talk to. And this will really help us to organize as a community. And if you're comfortable and willing, we can then also share a kind of summary with the webinar participants, saying and providing sort of the survey results of who's doing what where. So we do encourage you to fill it out if you have time. And of course, click the box if you're willing for this information to be shared with other webinar participants. And we'll compile a bit of sort of a joint mapping within the community and a joint knowledge product to the degree that we can. Finally, last caveat before I go into the details is also that, this is about a sort of a world in which we act together, and it's a world of delivery. And so we want to make sure that we're moving away from just thinking about what are the declarations, what are the commitments, what are the things that we want to see people say that they'll do, more towards sort of what is the actionable outcome here that we want to achieve. But without further ado, and taking much of what Maria has already shared, let me try and talk us through the organizing framework, and then my colleagues in the following section will also deep dive on each of these. So I won't spend too much time on the details, but as we've discussed and as we all know, 160 countries, the first pillar could be around NDCs and ensuring that the UAE declaration drives funded plans for food systems transformation. We all know that 160 countries signed the Emirates Declaration, committing to including food in their NDCs. The Alliance of Champions was launched to spearhead that effort and demonstrate progress. And so we're really hoping that despite only 22 NDCs being published so far, we see growing momentum towards November, and that these NDCs include food in a meaningful way and are really credibly backed by rigorous and costed assessments. So this is pillar number one. I know many people are working towards this, and Martina Fleckenstein from WWF will talk more about that in a second. The second organizing, let's say, work stream under which we could all collaborate is obviously the Baku to Belém roadmap. As Maria mentioned, we have now this working program to reach this 1.3 trillion infamous target. In terms of its relevance to the food systems community, we know that we're going to need to crowd in private finance to reach some of these goals. And so really we see that COP needs to help unlock some of the mechanisms by which we can create these blended finance structures, such as Article 6, such as the TFFF, which could be a very interesting and innovative mechanism to finance conservation and thereby also support sort of our farming outcomes. Thirdly, Miriam mentioned a little bit about sort of adaptation. We're all expecting with bated breath these holistic indicators on adaptation, including on food, that will be released around Bonn. And so there's a hope that these indicators, paired also with potentially a replenishment of the adaptation fund and national adaptation strategies that we hope will be released as well, can sort of create a package and a framework by which we as a community can accelerate the transition towards more resilient food systems and see real progress at country level. So these three buckets were all under the sort of UNFCCC agenda and negotiations. The next two buckets are focused more on what Brazil can bring to the table. Maria mentioned extensively, and I won't go into details on the PNCPD, which is the pasture land restoration program in Brazil, and the ABC Plus program, which is around decarbonization and a shift towards regenerative agriculture. Brazil has really held this leadership on this sustainable agriculture agenda very strongly. And so we're hoping that it can bring its global clout to play in advancing the agenda at a multilateral level. Also supported by the business community, which of course launched the action agenda on regen landscapes at COP28, and which we hope to see continued through to COP30. And as we were talking about sort of major polluters or emitters, we hope that there will also be some deep dive action on a few key issues or deeper issues such as livestock and manure management, fertilizers, food loss and waste, building also on the organic methane declaration from the last COP. Last but not least, we think it's really important to bring the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty back into the picture for COP, and we hope that building on the sort of guidance note on hunger and NDCs that they released, they will also play a major part in the proceedings, helping to bridge the gaps between the nutrition and the climate agenda. In addition to that, there's a wonderful initiative, which I will butcher the name of, but Na Mesa da COP, which is looking at the COP menu, and we hope to have obviously nutritious, regenerative and locally sourced foods at COP. So this is how we're thinking about where we could each contribute as a community. And again, please, through the forms, share with us what you're doing on these 5 pillars and beyond. This is, of course, up for discussion and for changes. The last word I'll say is we, of course, want farmers to be central to this whole debate. And Andrea from WFO will talk to this. There have been sort of a naysayer community in the farming sector as well. And so how can we bring those disparate voices together to really inform how we're going to drive implementation is critical. And the final point to say that, of course, the Brazilian government is diverse and the agriculture agenda is shared. So you'll see in gray, there's reflections of the types of institutions that might lead these pillars or these key work streams that I've mentioned. Without further ado, I'll hand back to you, Lasse. So thank you all for joining again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alicia. And what a great overview. I mean, those who've been working in the food and climate space for many years know that 8 to 10 years ago, we were dreaming of just having small mentions of food and agriculture in the UNFCCC space. And now there's so much going on, and it's clear that all of us cannot do everything all at once. So this overview, I think, really captures the breadth of what needs to be done, but also makes it tangible and digestible. So thank you so much to you and for Folu for doing that. So with that, I want to come to Francesca Kamyla. She is the Senior Lead for Food at Farming and the Global Strategic Communications Council. Most of you knows it as GSCC. Francesca, over to you, and just say next slide when you want to skip to the next one.
Thank you, Lasse. Yeah, so I'm, I've lost you on my Zoom screen. Can you see me? You can hear me?
We hear you fine, yes.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to speak to 3 things today. Firstly, just kind of give an overview of the current political context that we're in and this sort of challenging landing zone. Secondly, to kind of give a flavour of the state of the debate on media reporting on COP30 and where our entry points might be for food systems. And then thirdly, just to talk about some narrative ideas to kind of put out here for discussion. I think we have a delicate dance to choreograph together when it comes to food systems and strategic communications at this COP. I think there's lots of potential to kind of aim for the sky and really increase ambition. But there's also a real risk of backlash and toxification of our issues. So I guess on the ambition side, it's stuff that will be familiar to all of us, that kind of food systems are key to implementation. There's vast economic potential if we invest in food systems transformation. And obviously food security is top of mind at the moment. And I do think that helps our agenda. But on the kind of backlash side, we know that disinformation is kind of really rife around this COP. There is an organised disinfo campaign that's kind of intended to downplay and undermine this. And food is often a key part of that kind of culture war. And we know that the kind of far right are quite skilled in weaponising that. And I think there are two key moments to have in mind when this might play out ahead of COP. One is obviously the Agri-COP, which is being organised by agribusiness with potential links to far-right groups in Brazil and beyond, and also then the Eat Lancet report, which is obviously going to be a really key piece of report for our research for our community, but we don't want it to kind of add fuel to the fire. And then it goes without saying the kind of the Trump effect, all of which has a massive bearing on food systems. So I think this means we're in a challenging landing zone. We want to really maximise the potential for ambition on food systems, but we don't want to toxify and fuel that wider anti-climate backlash and undo that years of work that Lasse's just been referring to. So yeah, wanted to put it into context, but I think there's lots of potential. I don't want to be too downbeat here. So on to the next slide, please, Lasse. So yeah, this is just a kind of a flavour of the debate. At the moment that we're seeing in English language media reporting, so it's got an English language bias, and not all of this is like specific to food systems, but I think it's important to see where the media interest lies, because our job in terms of strategic communications is thinking about, okay, what's on the political agenda that we've just been hearing about from Maria and Alessia, what do we kind of want to push for collectively, which is our discussion today, and where's the media at? And we need to find that kind of sweet spot in between. So there's obviously been lots of reporting on the logistical piece. Obviously, because it's being hosted in the Amazon, there's kind of a spotlight on the Amazon and kind of destruction in the Amazon and how that relates to kind of wider climate emissions. We're seeing interesting reporting on countries that are really trying to stand by and push for countries to stand by climate commitments. We know economic stories, whether that's the economic losses and due to kind of climate impacts, which again, Maria's been speaking to, as well as the economic potential of investing in climate action, often gets a lot of media interest. And then again, sort of climate impacts on the food system is often what we find a useful way to help start a conversation about food systems transformation. So just finally onto the last slide, you might have to click twice to get that up there. This is just really a kind of a starter for 10, as we say in English, a starting point for discussion that we really want to put out there and discuss with this community as we feed back on everything that we're hearing today. And I think it's kind of a narrative, we need to think of a narrative as something that can help increase ambition. It's not necessarily the technical language that you would use in negotiations. Think of it as like the air cover to help unlock those more technical changes. And there's 4 key points or notes I think we might want to hit. So firstly, with kind of our audiences here being governments as well as other influential actors. So implementation, we've heard about that. And I think we just need to make our issue thing, food systems, as like key to implementation. We've got so much to offer. I think it's the FOLU research that came out a few years ago that's saying like investing in food systems transformation could unlock trillions. Let's make our issue sing when it comes to that part of the agenda. And also I think it's important to think about in terms of in terms of like maintaining momentum and that kind of 10-year pathway that Maria was speaking to, because yeah, COP31 isn't going to kind of deliver, and COP30 isn't going to deliver all of the results that we want to see, but we do think it is an important point to maintain momentum building on COP28. Obviously, Brazil's leadership on tackling hunger and support for farmers, I think it is really key. We've heard about that. And I think that's a kind of a useful way to kind of, you know, point to other countries about what they can do in terms of NDCs, as well as kind of linking to more technical things like the GGA indicators, etc. And I think more important, it's kind of also investing in food systems resilience helps us also to speak to a bit of the kind of trade agenda that we're seeing a lot of media interest around. Finance, obviously this is the third point, you know, links to the Baku to Belém roadmap. And I think this is really a point of kind of like speaking to the work that lots of people in this community are doing around the importance of investing getting finance directly to those who are doing the implementation. So farmers, indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as investing in the kinds of adaptation and mitigation that we want to see. So restoration, regenerative agriculture, etc. And then the final point speaks to kind of mitigation, which is obviously a bit trickier. But I think it's really kind of a message to all countries that if we don't invest in mitigation, then we're going to undo all of our work of investing in adaptation if emissions carry on rising. And I feel like deforestation is obviously a key entry point for this. That's where kind of media attention is lying. And also, I think that helps us to kind of bridge the gap in terms of the nature agenda as well, which others have spoken to. So if we're talking about an implementation agenda to address, you know, to deliver on deforestation commitments, then we need to address the biggest driver of deforestation, which is the food system. So I'll finish there. This is obviously a starting point for discussion. And I know there'll be kind of, I think there's possible plans for a follow-up discussion with the groups organising this at London Climate Action Week. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Francesca. This was great to hear, and it's clear we have a lot of work ahead of us. And thank you everybody for sitting through this very in-depth outline of some of the key aspects we need to be looking at in terms of the roadmap towards COP30, in terms of like some of the major issues that we as a community can address, and also how do we actually engage in it from a narrative and communications perspective, so we ensure that the key topics are elevated in the public and the political discourse. So we're now going to move over to going more in depth on some of the issues. But before we do that, some of you might have joined a call that was organized and hosted by FAO yesterday that was looking into also the journey to COP30 and some of the ways that the multilateral space and also countries are going to be engaging a lot in the coming months leading up to COP30. There was a lot of focus on the finance issues, and particularly mentioning that only 4% of climate funding actually goes to food and agriculture measures, while the sector accounts for a third of the emissions. A lot of talk about adaptation and resilience in Brazil being core to food security, plans and financing needed to bring substantial change, smallholders, local engagement, and so forth. And also we got an insight into some of the key discussions we're going to be seeing just around the corner at SB62 in Bonn, namely the full-day workshop on June 17th, in which the Sharm el-Sheikh Joint Working Group is going to be addressing the key aspects leading up to COP30. We also heard a little bit about the importance of interministerial collaboration, like the whole of government approach that Emma was speaking about. She's on the call here now as well. And of course, finance was brought forward. And more than anything, there was about implement, and ensuring that all stakeholders are engaged. And we're lucky to have Liva with us here today, and Liva from FAO. Liva, would you mind just coming in and just for 2 minutes talking a little bit about some of the key takeaways from your perspective from the seminar yesterday?
Thank you, Lasse, and thank you all also for reaching out and coordinating on the last minute on exchanging what we learned yesterday and also how we can work together better. But I think it's also great to see how this community has grown in the last years and how much of expertise we are all together gathering. And with that being said, also as previous speakers already pointed out, it's not anymore only former Coronivia process and Sharm el-Sheikh process. Now the agriculture, food security and food systems are featuring, as yesterday and also today pointed out, in number of the negotiation topics. And in addition, I would like to highlight the ones, of course, on the climate finance and 1.3 trillion goal as well, and how do we integrate agriculture, agri-food systems transformation in this. Also, the work on the adaptation indicators, as you know, will be critical this year, as the indicators now from the independent experts have been passed on to the country negotiators, and we have about 53 sub-indicators focusing on food systems. So I would really like you also to keep an eye on that process at Bonn and at COP, and hopefully we will have those indicators adopted at COP. So yeah, I think the takeaway message, and I think also the previous speakers already kind of summarized the challenges and also the topics that are going to be covered in Bonn and at COP. But at the same time, the challenge is really that implementation part. So how do we translate these negotiations and all the deliberations that we already see now in the decisions to the national policies, and then also to the ground action as well? And vice versa, how do we translate already the practices that work at the farm level or so to the national policies, and then also bringing back to decisions and the initiatives? So there we still see, and I'm sure that you working practically with the countries have seen the same challenge. How do we speak about what we learn in UNFCCC through the workshops, through these formal processes, and how do we bring that in the national commitments, in the NBCs, also then further in the MBSAPs and these cross linkages? So as far as we are speaking about the implementation, but I think there needs to be also more focus on these links between these global, national, subnational, and local kind of processes and practices. So I hope that as a community we can all support the countries then and work together further. So that's in short, Lasse, and thank you so much. And yeah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Liv. I really appreciate it, and so great to see that we are collaborating across all constituencies now and all stakeholders. We are now going to be going over to the next session for today, where we're going to be going into the work streams and priorities. And you'll see these great speakers we've got lined up for you here on the screen. Each speaker will have like 3 to 5 minutes, which is very little to go through such huge issues they're going to be covering. So please do take advantage of the chat box and ask any questions you want there. And each of these speakers will probably be happy to reply as much as they can. And do remember to put on your camera and also connect, share your emails with others in the chat box so we can help grow this community. So without further ado, I'd like to first hand over to Martina Fleckenstein, the Global Director of Policy at WWF International. Martina, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lasse, and thanks to the previous speaker. I think it's a very timely session we have here. We are only 5 months ahead of the next COP, and I think it's an important moment. You will see I will have some reiteration and repetition, but sometimes it's good to repeat content as long as it's not implemented. And just one remark on the Sharm el-Sheikh John Burke previous Coronia. I think it's already a huge success that we have in Bonn a food system knowledge session. So when we started some years back, nobody was talking about food and agriculture in the Coronivia in the way we are talking at this. So we had a long fight to bring in the systemic approach and to consider a food system from production up to consumption. And I think at least we made this systemic approach in the Coronivia now. Looking at the COP30, and this will be very important because it's a time where the member states have to submit, or by the COP30, they have to submit their new NDCs, the NDC 3.0. And we all know that the current NDCs are not ambitious enough, they are not systemic, they are not inclusive. And if we won't change and have more ambitious NDCs, we will not achieve a 1.5 target. And we are here all together to discuss about transformation. And we need not only a transformation of the energy sector, but we also need this transformation of food systems. Food systems which are emitting or responsible for about 1/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And at the same time, like you have heard, the food systems are the most vulnerable to climate shocks. We have droughts, we have we have floods, we have wildfire. And the one who hits are the hardest hits are the smallholder farmers. And we will hear later also from the family farmer about this, where they produce 80% of the world's food. So there is a huge pressure now really to implement and to have ambitious climate commitments. At the same time, and that's also something we have to be aware that in the IPCC report, it's mentioned that there is a huge potential in the agriculture and food sector for mitigation, for resilience, and also for the adaptation sector. And just yesterday, the Potsdam Institute published a report or research where they also mentioned that the targeted measures such as implementing the Paris Agreement, switching to, and I quote now, healthier diets, improving food quality, and using water and nutrients more efficiently can effectively also reduce the exceeding of the planetary boundaries. So also this is very important to build up this kind of linkages. But if you look at the current NDCs, and that's also based on several analyses WWF and others have done, the NDC 2.0 are not ambitious enough, and food is still, or food system is still underrepresented, especially if you look on the systemic approach, which means considering the production, but also food loss and waste and diets, which is merely absent in most of the NDCs. And by now, by the way, only 23 countries have submitted their NDCs, which would mean there is still a huge opportunity between now and the COP in November, really to influence and to integrate, really influence the new setting of the NDCs. Just a little bit about WWF. The NDC is a priority for us. As I mentioned, we have done a lot of assessment. We have developed the Food Forward NDC tool, which should help member states also to identify their priority. It offers a lot of intervention and measures. And we also have run some in-person dialogues, which are very encouraging to see how engaged and how huge the interest is, especially from the different ministries, also from the agriculture ministries and the related multi-stakeholder partners on the integration. And let me also make one remark here. We talk about the NDCs and the COP, but we also have to consider the other two conventions, the biodiversity and the Land Convention. I think what we really need is this stronger integration and alignment of the biodiversity, the climate, and the Land Convention. And I've seen that there is Gabriel from UNCCD also in the call. It's great to see, and we have to consider how we could better align this. So what do we expect from the COP30? So first of all, and this is still, as I mentioned, only 23 NDCs have been published. We expect the governments really to embed food system into the NDCs and really as a central pillar. And not only on the production side, but also considering the whole food chain, the production, consumption, and nutrition. And it was really encouraging to see, for example, that countries like Laos, they are really considering to integrate nutrition. And the Kenya one also made some remark on nutritious food for all. The second thing is that we need to have the implementation of the pathways. And I think it's important that, as I mentioned, we need really a better alignment. And means a better alignment at the national level, which means a better collaboration and cooperation of the different ministries who are responsible for the NDCs, but also the linkage, for example, to the national food pathways. They're currently updated for the UN Food System Summit +4. And my personal perception that this is not really connected with the NDCs. It's very often disconnected. It's two parallel processes. And there is a lot of knowledge coming from the food paths, national food pathways under the UNFSS, but there is not a real linkage to the NDCs. And the same, we need this really strong linkage to the biodiversity strategy and the land degradation neutrality under the UNCCD. And for the COP30, and I'm still waiting for the announcement that there will be also an agriculture and food day at the COP30. Like we have started the journey in Sharm el-Sheikh, followed up by the very strong food-dominated COP in Dubai, in UAE, then Baku, and hopefully we will have the same then at the COP30. And let me finally close, and this is about the financing. We know we have to scale up finance, but scale up finance doesn't explicitly mean that the finance is really going in the countries, ended up at the landscape, ended up to the farmer, to the smallholder, to the farmers. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, not just having the funding, the big figures agreed at the global level. It had really to be breakdown. And for that, really need also capacity and knowledge building for those who have to implement the NDCs, or the NDB subs, and to make people aware that this sometimes very difficult to read NDC document is something which is really understood by those people in the regional level. And if we talk about funding, we have to speed up the distribution of funding. A GCF program needs about 3 to 5 years to get the funding, and the same is with CHEP. So we need really this speedboat funding to start with the implementation right after the COP30 and the agreed NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina. Excellent, very comprehensive overview. And thank you so much for highlighting the aspects of having the 3 Rio conventions on biodiversity certification and climate change aligned. And it's so interesting. We go full circle this year, 33 years after those 3 conventions were agreed in that very same country where COP30 is being held this year. So with that, I would like to come to our next speaker, who is going to be Claire. And Claire is going to be speaking about finance. Over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Lasse. Thanks for the opportunity. So by way of introduction, FAIRR is an 80 trillion investor network that helps investors manage material risks linked to intensive animal agriculture, including risk related to climate change, biodiversity loss, and antimicrobial resistance. It's really encouraging to see the ambition of the Baku-Belém roadmap, which aims to scale up climate finance to, as we just heard, at least 1.3 trillion by 2035. And that kind of scale and urgency is exactly what's needed. The first point I want to highlight is the importance of maintaining and raising ambition in the next round of NDCs. At COP26, FAIRR brought together investors representing over 12 trillion assets under management, calling on G20 countries to strengthen their NDCs and to include agriculture-specific targets. Looking ahead, there is a real opportunity to provide clear policy direction. And with food supply chains under growing pressure, it's more important than ever to have development plans with concrete and measurable goals. The second point I like to make is the need to move from commitments to real implementation, especially when it comes to repurposing subsidies and aligning incentives. It was great to see over 100 countries sign the UAE declaration, committing to integrate food system in the national plans. The declaration also referenced the need to redirect public support, a real important shift. In 2023, FAIRR launched a 7 trillion investor statement calling for agricultural subsidies to be aligned with climate and nature goals. The message was clear: both climate change and nature loss are systemic risks to investment, and public policy needs to catch up. The same statement also called for more financing to support just transition, recognizing that farmers and other affected stakeholders must not be left behind. They are not just part of the transition, they are key to it. We've also seen strong commitments in the Glasgow Declaration on Forest and Land Use, where over 100 countries pledged to end reverse deforestation by 2030. Now it's about how those commitments are followed through. We know that over half of global GDP depends on nature and natural capital. So we can't afford to treat climate and nature as separate challenges. They have to be tackled together. Finally, I want to mention the Tropical Finance Forever facility, a new initiative that's gaining investor attention. It's great to see this starting to take shape. For the facility to work in practice and for the bonds to be attractive to portfolio managers, it's crucial that investors are involved in how it's developed. The details are still evolving, but there is a lot of excitement about contributing to something that could be a first of its kind. I'll stop there, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity to share with you today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claire, and thanks for also highlighting the TFFF. It is very inspiring, and hopefully it's something that can help with the very needed agenda on accruing financing for the change we need to see. Great. So up next, we have Kamyla Borges, who is the Senior Land Use and Sustainable Agriculture Specialist in the Institute for Climate and Society. Kamyla, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Lassie. Hello, everybody. Well, we as Brazilians are quite happy this week because the Brazilian researcher Mariângela Hungria, he received the World Food Prize for her research on the use of biological inputs in agriculture. She and many other voices reinforce a key message. Soil health is essential for food production, water conservation, biodiversity protection, soil carbon sequestration, and also climate resilience. The path to ensuring soil health lies in adopting regenerative agriculture. This includes practices already widely adopted in Brazil, like no-till farming, as well as others that still require scaling, such as integrated systems, a sound livestock management, and replacing agrochemicals by bioinputs. However, Brazil and the world in general face a major challenge. It is estimated that over 40% of the entire planet land is already degraded. UNFCCC data shows that between 2015 and 2019, at least 100 million hectares of health and productive land were degraded every year, threatening global food and water security. This loss is equivalent to twice the size of Greenland and affects the lives of more than 1.3 billion people directly exposed to land degradation, most of them smallholder farmers. On one hand, these alarming numbers show that we are heading in the wrong direction in terms of soil health, productivity, sustainability, social inclusion, and food security. On the other hand, focusing efforts on regenerating these lands emerges as a path forward. First, regenerating degraded lands, whether through conversion to regenerative agriculture or also through ecological restoration, supports the goals of the three main environmental conventions: the climate, the biodiversity, and the desertification. It can prevent deforestation, it can increase soil carbon removal, it offers significant mitigation potential. It also restores biodiversity and prevents desertification. Just as importantly, regenerative agriculture builds resilience. Second, it provides an opportunity to approach these lands under a new production paradigm, prioritizing the transition to regenerative systems and practices. Third, regenerating these areas using regenerative practices also catalyzes social and economic benefits for farmers, including greater productivity and inclusion. Many of these degraded lands, we must highlight, are in the hands of smallholder farmers, demanding a strong focus on productive inclusion. Yet, there are major challenges: the lack of technical assistance, limited access to finance, and low levels of public and private investment in regenerative practice. COP30 in Brazil presents a unique opportunity to move forward a strategic view of land regeneration by highlighting its mitigation potential and its key role in adaptation and resilience. More importantly, it opens the space to improve public policies and redirect public and private financing in this direction. Who stands to gain? In my opinion, farmers, mostly small ones, ecosystems, and the climate. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much, Kamyla. Excellent. And And thanks for pointing out the essence of not just climate change, but land restoration, and how this is crucial leading up to COP30, and also like that getting it right with land restoration and shifting the food system to working with nature and being a net sequestration factor for climate change is essentially about equity and social justice, and indeed human rights as well, because it really impacts the smallholder farmers. So thank you so much for making that absolutely clear to us here today. Next up, we have Praveen Rajastiston is the Director of Adaptation and Resilience Mainstreaming at the World Resources Institute. Praveen, over to you.
Thank you, Lasse. Good morning, everyone. My name is Praveen Rajastiston. I'm the Adaptation Resilience Mainstreaming Director at the World Resources Institute. I was formerly the Countries and Impact Director at the Food and Land Use Coalition, and it's great to be on this call. It's a chance for my current and previous passions to come together. I'm joining from Recife in Brazil, which is currently hosting the 19th Community-Based Adaptation Conference this week. And we're actually experiencing some severe flooding today in Recife right now. An emergency has been declared and they've had to cancel today's conference sessions. Obviously, the of an adaptation conference being disrupted by a climate shock. The power and internet have been on and off this morning, so apologies if I get cut off. Now, often people talk about adaptation and resilience as a challenge for the future. We talk about climate trends in 20, 30 years' time, but the reality is climate change is happening now, and we're seeing the impacts of climate change on the food system today. Just yesterday, we did a field visit to a community near Recife that relies on agroforestry and fisheries for their income, and they're experiencing changes in their yield, both from the forests and from the fisheries, which they attribute to a changing climate. Now, when we add that up at a global scale, the impact of climate change on the food system will truly be transformative. And transformation is a word we use in the food system agenda, often in a positive sense, but the transformation that will happen as a result of climate change potentially could be extremely negative. Changing rainfall patterns will impact on food production, it will decrease yields, and there'll be more droughts and floods. Increased temperatures will make food transport and perishable goods harder, driving increased food loss and waste. And this will doubtless exacerbate food insecurity and impact on farmer incomes. Many of the challenges that Kamyla described in her session just now will be made worse by climate change. Now, the good news is many of the shifts that are already being promoted in the food system, whether related to local production and consumption of food or regenerative approaches, reliance on water, diversification of diets and improving nutrition, all of these things improve resilience and will help for countries to prepare and respond to climate change. And we need to make more use of climate predictions and data to help adjust how we're supporting the transition in the food system, as this will make or break the success of these interventions in the future. The good news is that breakthroughs in AI, machine learning, crowdsourcing of data and climate science mean that we have access to better data than ever, and we need to make more use of that within the food system. There are tremendous synergies between the adaptation and food agendas, and they come together in Brazil. This is a country that is prioritizing work to address chronic hunger and farmer poverty challenges, and it's also at the cutting edge of adaptation thinking, driving forward a very ambitious national adaptation plan. Collectively, we need to learn from this experience and continue to link the adaptation resilience agendas, in particular at a system level, all level issues, and they require system thinking. Now, in terms of COP, there's a huge push at COP, both on food and on adaptation. And this morning, we were hoping to hear from the Brazil government's COP30 team. They were due to present at the conference, but unfortunately, that session was cancelled. I imagine the objectives for the Brazilian government will be to reaffirm and raise commitments on adaptation finance and also strengthen the mechanisms for monitoring progress on adaptation through the global goal. And as a community, we should continue to push for significant international investments in climate change adaptation through bilateral, multilateral, and private sector sources. However, I think we also have to accept the reality that the prospects for increased international public climate finance are not looking promising right now. And so one area we're keen to explore in WRI is the potential for domestic climate finance sources from public, private, and philanthropic sources. We're increasingly finding country governments are prioritizing adaptation and resilience in their national budgeting. Innovative approaches such as climate smart budget tagging and the integration of macro critical risks into fiscal policy, basically thinking about what adaptation means for things like inflation, debt, taxation. These can be tools that help countries prepare and allocate their resources towards urgent adaptation and resilience challenges. We find the same for the private sector, who are often on the front lines of the impacts of a changing climate and the impacts showing up in their revenues and their profits. We need improved risk management of supply chains, and we also see a big role for the private sector in adaptation and innovation and seeing resilience building as a growth opportunity for some parts of the private sector. We need to better support private sector on this journey with the right incentives, technical support, advocacy, and conducive regulatory environment. Now, my overarching message for COP30 is that adaptation action doesn't need to wait for global agreement and global mechanisms. It's not only possible, but it's already happening at the national, state, and municipal level. What I've learned from my participation in this week's conference is there's amazing work that's happening on the ground. This should be a source of inspiration and learning for the global community, and we need to improve mechanisms to share country-based.
Thank you so much, Praveen. And you managed to make it through without any break-offs. There was a few time it skipped slightly, but I think everything was absolutely clear. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Recife. Watch out for the bull sharks up there. We would like to come to the next speaker, which is Sarah Lahey, who is the lead initiative and climate action and nutrition for Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, also known as GAIN. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Lasse. It's great to be with you all today. I want to start by emphasizing that the main benefit of taking a food systems approach is that we can drive progress across multiple outcomes simultaneously. We can de-silo approaches and coordinate different sectors. And for hunger, and specifically for nutrition, which has a bidirectional relationship with climate change, where nutrition is directly affected by climate change through a number of pathways. For example, rising temperatures are affecting nutrient density in crops, and where food decisions that affect nutritional status are also impacting emissions, deforestation, and other key drivers of climate change. This is really especially important. We cannot solve one crisis without solving the other, and there are many opportunities for us to make faster progress on both by taking an integrated approach. And this is the focus of ICAN, the Initiative on Climate Action and Nutrition, which is a multi-sector COP27 initiative launched by the Egyptian presidency together with GAIN, as well as WHO, FAO, SUN, and others. And our goal is really to integrate climate nutrition policy in order to unlock shared wins that address both challenges together. So with this in mind, and speaking for GAIN and ICAN as nutrition-focused actors, and with ICAN intended to be a COP-to-COP initiative that promotes continuity across COPs, at COP30, our focus will really be on driving climate nutrition co-benefits through coherent policy, strategies, programs, and financing. So like many others here, we are working on NDCs, but really to explicitly integrate nutrition, drawing connections between health and agriculture commitments. And as I believe my colleague Ed from SUN mentioned in the chat, we're really trying to ensure that nutrition doesn't fall through the cracks with those two different sectors. We're also working with countries separately to integrate climate nutrition at the national and subnational level, for example, by making national nutrition strategies more climate sensitive, and we'll bring those learnings to COP. On the finance side, we're also working to generate the evidence to make stronger claims that more climate finance should go towards investments that advance nutrition. That is dual purpose investments, so climate nutrition dual purpose actions. And one way we are working to do this is by developing a methodology to measure the social return on investment of dual purpose investments over single purpose investments. Really trying to generate the evidence to advocate that climate actors and investors should care about nutrition, not because it's good for human development and good for nutrition, but because it's good for climate, for both resilience and mitigation. And we hope to be able to share this at COP30. In terms of bringing climate and nutrition and hunger together, as Maria shared in her opening remarks, we know that Brazil is strategically linking its leadership of the Global Alliance with its role as host of COP30, and that in doing so, they're making a number of important steps in bringing hunger and nutrition into the COP30 agenda. As we already heard, they're planning the COP30 declaration on the fight against hunger, poverty, and climate change. GAIN has offered to support on the content and positioning and offered ICANN as a useful UNFCCC COP vehicle to take that forward. And in doing so, we really want to continue to emphasize that though a focus on hunger, poverty, and food systems can serve the nutrition agenda, nutrition really does need to be explicitly included. And as Alessia shared, we also know that Brazil has put out a hunger in the NDC's guidance note, and we're really excited to see that. Again, this offers a great opportunity to continue to promote the integration of nutrition-sensitive actions within NDCs. I think one component of the Global Alliance that's really worth highlighting is that countries are encouraged to select interventions from the policy basket, which is wide-ranging and includes many actions on nutrition or interventions on nutrition. And this is exemplified with the 2030 sprints, which are an initial set of projects that are portending early action, ranging from a push on integrated maternal and early childhood interventions to a sprint to feed 150 million children daily with nutritious school meals. And we know that the Alliance does plan to review progress at a summit in Qatar in November, and then we'll also maintain strong links to COP30, which is really encouraging to see. Even with these clear, strong intentions and the positive signs, we still also believe that sharing specific suggestions as a community will be essential. So making clear what language we want to see and where in negotiated texts, in declarations, in initiatives, or elsewhere. And we believe we need to continue to articulate the precise benefits of jointly mobilizing on nutrition and climate, as this is currently an emerging or underrepresented dimension in climate talks. And here I want to add that we believe that language and negotiation outcomes are critical, but we also believe that sharing of success cases or technical learnings for climate nutrition co-benefits are just as important, as this presidency, as we've already heard, is really leaning into COP30 being an implementation COP and shifting focus from process to realizing tangible outcomes, which we're really glad to see. Some entry points for this may be, for example, the detailed work on food systems following the Sharm Joint Workshop in Bonn, the workshops on links between forestry and agriculture under the mitigation work program, or the ongoing work on indicators under the Global Goal on Adaptation. I think I'm at my time, so I will leave it there. Thank you very much. Lasse, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was excellent, and thank you so much for highlighting all the crucial issues we need to be covering this year with nutrition. As was mentioned yesterday at the FAIRR webinar, without a focus on food security and indeed nutrition, all this work does not matter. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And with that, I want to come over to our last but not least speaker for this part of the webinar, Andrea Porro, who is the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you very much, and allow me just a few words on who we are. WFO is a member-based organization that that brings together national farm organizations and agricultural cooperatives for more than 50 countries. And we also act as a convener for farmers in our membership and beyond in major global policy process and multilateral fora. WFO has been working and supporting coordination effort on the farmer constituency at the UNFCCC since its establishment, and in 2024 we're also working as a vice chair of the International Steering Committee for the Decade of Family Farming, working closely with other global and regional farm organizations to enhance the role and recognition of family farmers in global decision making. And it's been fantastic to be here today with all of you and debating on the road from Baku to Belém, but also from COP to COP, coming from a 2024 that was the hottest year on record, with climate change supercharging extreme weather events and global temperature exceeding the Paris objective for the first time. On the other hand, also, we have seen in the first month of 2025 significant geopolitical shift that cast doubt on the international community ability to deliver consistently on climate commitment. We also had facing, obviously, trade dispute and armed conflict that add uncertainties that the farmer and family farmer especially cannot sustain, along with all the other direct consequences of climate change that are affecting them. And they cannot, farmer, to step back from the climate debate and the multilateral system. Yet, more than anyone, they need this process to shift gears, enabling key stakeholders to take greater ownership of the global conversation and empowering them, farmers, to drive action at the national level. Climate realism demands that farmers and family farmers, which are the one providing the 4F, food, fuel, fibers, to all of us, but also protecting environment, water cycle, and biodiversity. That's why I also agree on the need to look at the convergence of the three COP processes, because the climate financing seems not enough today in quantity, but also in quality. It's not reaching farmers, it's not reaching family farmers. And even when it reaches, is in a modality that is very challenging for farmers to use in the form of loan, or if it's a form of grant coming from multilateral development bank, sometimes the complexity to access this fund discourage the most small and fragile farmers to be able to use this opportunity to transform. Among them also, what always be mentioned that the most fragile of the fragile are still women farmers and young farmers that are facing compounding effect of access to land and difficulties to reach market in a meaningful manner, and sometimes too often of a non-recognition of their work. Sustainability and resilience in agriculture are often framed as technical challenges, high cost, limited capacity, and regulatory complexity. Addressing this issue is necessary, but insufficient if decisions are not shared and solutions are not co-created with farmers. A just transition towards more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive agri-food system requires investment, innovation, and most critically, equitable partnership. That's why we advocate at WFO that farmer organizations and cooperatives should work closely with government and key actors, and they are the levers to crack complex issues, bridging the gap between global talks and national implementation. That's why also WFO, with the help and the support of the colleague and friends of the Follow Coalition, we are really building this idea to gather farmers and farmer representatives from all over the world in Brazil in the lead up to COP30, few days before the opening, to take stock of the state of climate action in agriculture, engage with other key value chain actors, as well as large stakeholders on the way to COP, and join in for a call for climate policy to fully reflect the realities on the ground. For us, strengthening engagement between farmers, family farmers, and other actors in the value chain is the key to address growing uncertainties and advance action on climate, food security, and sustainable development. We also help to ground this high-level debate on sustainable food system in the lived experience of farmers. building ownership also among the global farming community on key issue at COP30, while enhancing the profile of farmer-driven climate solution. Last on the conclusion, it's important, and we recognize that is a great achievement to see agriculture and food system mentioned in the NDCs, but it's not enough a mention. It is the build-up of the dialogue that WFO has been advocating for since our inception of involving farmers and their representation in this dialogue in what will transform, or say, walk the talk. And that's what with WFO, with all of you, with anyone that is interested to join us, the effort will open our door to our event in Brazil. Stay tuned for more details. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That's great. And it's also so important to have the farmer constituency represented here today and indeed throughout the year leading up to COP30 and beyond. Not only you representing those who are actually producing all the food that we're eating and talking about, you're also the one with the most knowledge of what needs to happen on the ground. As for those of you who know Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, she always talks about that farmers are the original scientists, and I think she's absolutely right in that. So we find ourselves in the fortunate situation that we are a little bit ahead of time, with actually much contrary to what we expected, have time for a few questions, but just a few, just 5 minutes roughly. So I see the first one has come in here, Ed. Just before you come in, Ed, we're just going to take 3 questions. So it's first come, first serve. The first one went already. So if you put up your hand, and I'll just close it when I see 3 hands up. And please introduce yourself, mention who you're addressing the question to. Thank you so much. Ed, please come in.
Thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you, colleagues. What a wonderful meeting. My question, David WRI Folu, my question is to our Brazilian friends about what they think Lula might want to say on food, land use, nature, farmers at the leaders segment that happens just after Qatar and just before the COP begins in earnest. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Loud and clear. I think Marianetto had to leave. So Kamyla, would you be okay taking this one?
Well, tough question to answer you, but my guess is that Lula will take advantage of the potential leadership of Brazil, and it means make the connection between climate and food security, and climate and land restoration and land regeneration. I guess he will go in this direction, as he have already done in the BRICS meeting last week.
Great short question, great short answer. Thank you so much, Kamyla. Next, we have, I don't see your name. I see Vifu Uday, Plant-Based Treaty. Please do come in and please present yourself and who you're asking the question to.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Uday, or Vifu. I'm a music artist and I'm an activist with Plant-Based Treaty. So I have my question for Andrea. It was really awesome, hearing you talk about Andrea, about talking about farmers and governments working together. So with Plant-Based Treaty, we're trying to focus on shifting to a plant-based food system to mitigate the emissions. As we know, animal farming is the leading cause, or a top leading cause of deforestation, species loss, water use, land use. So I just wanted your advice on how at this COP to get farmers on board, and how we can work with your organization and the leaders at COP and governments. So I just wanted your advice, and any other people in Brazil, just to work with the farmers and the organizations and COP30. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you. Well, it's a complicated question for an organization like WFO that mainly operates as a convener. So for us, the center is enabling farmers through their representative and national farmers organization and cooperatives to bring up a dialogue that is farmer-centered and solutions are co-created with them. That is our recipe. If it talks about diet and change of diet, there are organizations that are operating in that space. For us, is all about empowering farmers to take a lead and co-create on processes that are farmer-friendly and designed with them. And that's, for me, is the angle that I sit with our representation that brings a lot of different farmers that come from different background and story, but all of them family farmer, all of them today struggling to have access to market, struggling to have access to income, struggling to have access to technology, struggling to have access to innovation. That, for me, are the unlocking factor that we as WFO keep advocating for. And the way for us is through farmer representation embedded in dialogue at national level, regional, and then global. Sorry if I cannot answer entirely on the change on diet, but I think it is other organizations here are more vested in this component. Thanks.
I think that's really good because I think I really appreciate your feedback. So if we can get the farmers to like make sure that they're feeling like they feel that their needs are being met, and then maybe working with governments to have subsidies towards like shifting from animal farming to like plant-based farming, I think maybe that could be a good option to discuss. I would love to like connect with you after also. I really appreciate your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the reply, and then great to see a connection has been made there. We're now going to take the third and what was supposed to be the final question. If there's time for one more question after that, we'll do that, but this would be the one. So over to you, Ana Cata Suarez Peña. Please introduce yourself and who the question is for.
Hi, Les. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all the work that we are doing together in a collaborative mode. I'm putting some data on the chat about food loss and waste prevention that I believe that is becoming very and more important when we are speaking not just about climate, when we are speaking about agriculture sector. Then Praveen and Martina, how are you seeing the role of the food loss and waste prevention in the COP30 and the interconnection between climate and agriculture sector? And of course, on the NDCs that we are seeing that this is growing and becoming more and more important. Thank you. And Praveen, adaptation without speak about food loss and waste is not possible.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Martina, please come in.
A quick answer. Thanks for your input also in the chat. I think, yes, it's a super important topic, and it's food loss and waste, and it's post-harvest losses. And as I mentioned, there is still a huge gap, and I'm very happy that there is also a project, and I saw some of the partners like Richard from REP who are involved in really focusing and pushing forward to have a stronger focus on post-harvest loss, food loss, and food waste in the NDCs. In the tool, we also have several measures, and everybody who has a chance to influence, please influence the NDCs and really make this as a priority. It's very important if you want to mitigate, and especially in the adaptation. Thanks, Ana Cata, for this very important question.
Thanks a lot, Martina. We can just take one final question, and then we will go to the closing remarks. So, Jerome, over for you. Just 1 minute, please.
Yes, my name is Jerome Remmers from TAP Coalition, and I have a question for Martina and maybe also for Claire. It's about what kind of key messages do we want to have on food systems at COP? So I proposed to have a key message like transitioning away from meat overconsumption, similar to transitioning away of fossil fuels 2 years ago. Could that maybe be a key message in your eyes, because it will cover a lot of problems, and it also relates to reducing hunger, reducing poverty, reducing deforestation, better health in most cases, because overconsumption is in most countries, it's there, also in Brazil, and it's causing a lot of problems for the climate, but also for other problems. I was interested in your views on that, and what you think about it. And maybe we need also some global petitions to involve all the people also to repeat those key messages and push more pressure on politicians. But I don't know who can do it, but I'm a small organization, but World Wide Fund is a larger organization with more resources to do such global campaigns, and maybe others as well.
Thank you so much, Jerome. Since we are coming close to the end, I would suggest that Martina and Claire reply in the chat box, and you also set up a direct line of communication we will not have time for a comprehensive reply here. So with that, we close the more overview and mainstreaming issue areas section, and we now come to the closing remarks from Gonzalo Muñoz. Gonzalo is the COP25 UN Climate Change High-Level Champion and also the co-founder of Ambition Loop. Gonzalo, great to see you again. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Lasse, and thanks to everyone. Definitely, this has been an excellent discussion. There are a lot of fantastic insights which can guide us, both individually and collectively, as a community, in order to make the most of this incredible opportunity in Belém. First, of course, my thanks to the COP30 presidency team for Brazil's leadership and at this critical moment. We all know that Brazil is uniquely positioned as a global leader in demonstrating how integrated solutions can and should address environmental sustainability, agricultural productivity, climate mitigation, and of course, social equity, all simultaneously. The invitation is warmly embraced. It's to join what in Portuguese we say global mutirão, to drive this inclusive broad-based action across all state and non-state actors and deliver the concrete real-world and near-term actions on climate that we urgently require. So this webinar is a really perfect example that there is a great foundation to build on within the food systems community. We heard today about how businesses, finance, civil society, philanthropy, farmers organizations, and many others are all mobilizing their respective efforts to drive impact this year. While we also know that 2 years ago at COP28, we launched the UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action that's now endorsed by 160 governments. And in that same moment, under the leadership of Her Excellency Ras Al-Mubarak, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP28, we set out a shared vision as a community of non-state actors for transforming food systems for people, nature, and climate. That call to action was endorsed by over 300 food system actors representing 2.2 billion residents, businesses along the agri-food value chain with around $1 trillion in revenue, 150 civil society and philanthropic organizations. And I would say one of the things that matters for me the most is 1/3 of those organizations headquarters in emerging and developing countries, operating in all regions of the world. So we have also a community that is well balanced in terms of representation, and that not only gives us definitely pride, but also a lot of hope. The priority actions are totally clear, and the proof points exist across production, consumption, protecting and restoring nature, and as Ana Catalina was just referring to, food loss and waste. So please do consider joining the food system call to action if you haven't already. The link to do so is on the Climate Champions team website, and that will also ensure that we can stay connected and that we share communications ahead of COP30. At COP28, we also saw the launch of the Action Agenda on Regenerative Landscapes, which is a groundbreaking model of multi-stakeholder action to address existing barriers to regenerative landscape transformation. We had also a great seminar a few weeks ago in Bahia. This agenda, this action agenda, includes more than 40 organizations, 8.7 million farmers actively engaged, 280 million hectares covered, and $6 billion committed by 2030. This year, I know that this community definitely stands ready to provide all support to Dan Yoshpi in his role as the United Nations Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP30. We definitely heard today many promising initiatives that are making good progress, that align well with his priorities in showcasing leadership, catalyzing action, and fostering collaboration from all actors across agri-food value chains. We are no doubt living in a time of rapid change and uncertainty, and we face significant geopolitical, socioeconomic, and environmental challenges. That's also one of the reasons why we need to remain very close and very strong together. And I know that a lot of thought is going into strategic communications, right? We know how the threat is coming there, and the narrative framing for food and agriculture is so important. So thank you, Francesca, for sharing those amazing insights on that. That's something that we all need to consider and definitely align ourselves into. It is also important that we further strengthen our coordination efforts, because community is more important than ever. And through coordination, of course, we can better identify opportunities for alignment, collaboration, and collective impact. By also articulating the opportunity for partnership, for innovation, and for capital flows, we can give confidence to governments to adopt more ambitious policies across several areas of climate action, including food systems. As Martina will mention, we need to be helpful for those opportunities on NDC enhancement this year. As a farmer, this is my most, let's say, personal agenda. I'm very personally committed to work with all of you, as well, of course, with the Brazilian authorities, and of course, with my friend Dan Joshby, for this agenda to be very prominent at COP30. I honestly, there are some plans, hopefully soon to be communicated. And of course, I also see, and I'm very pleased to see how the Rio conventions have a strong connections of solutions coming from the food and ag sector. Also, as a board member of both Science-Based Targets Initiative and the Global Food Banking Network, my expectations is that we as a community can all support and defend science, as well as the urgent need of those people that are suffering this cruel increase of injustice all around the world. So thank you to the UN Foundation, thank you to FOLU, and thank you to the Climate Champions team for bringing all of us together today and co-hosting this event. We're planning to host another webinar later in the year ahead of COP30 for us to have another checking point. And of course, there are milestones events in the build-up to Belém that some of us will be attending, including, of course, London Climate Action Week, the UN Food System Summit +4 in Addis Ababa, the Africa Food System Forum, and of course, the Climate Week in New York, and many others. There's a lot of things happening in Brazil as well. At the end of this month in May, we will have the One Planet Summit in Brasilia about food systems. I'll be there as well. So hoping that many of us will gather in different moments. Finally, please do take a minute to fill in the form that Alicia mentioned. We will be collating the findings and circulating with this community. And definitely thanks to each and every one of you who have been taking the time out to join today for the work that you're doing to champion food system transformation and for the opportunities for us to advance this important agenda at COP30. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo, for your leadership and guidance. And thank you so much from me as well to all the speakers and all the attendees here today. And some of you stayed with us more than 1.5 hours. That's impressive. Thank you so much for that. And finally, I also want to mention that this has been possible due to the co-collaboration between Rebecca, Alicia, Michaela, and myself. So just wanted to make a shout out for them as well. And with that, we close this webinar. Goodbye.